things are about to get a little graver. You mark my words. Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now this mostly OG Dragon Ball focused story is all about the notion of time passing at a different pace from the original. Let's say for example that Goku, or Kakarot initially, or here we refer to him as Boxster, landed a few minutes or hours before or after he did in the original timeline. This would seem like something pretty innocuous. Really, Masako? Him just landing at a different time? It's not really worth discussion in this type of forum, really? When you take into account that the planet is spinning obviously around in time all the time, things start to get a little more curious, because if Kakarot landed on Earth just a few minutes later than he did, he wouldn't have landed at the same place he did in the original, Mount Paozu, but instead potentially Capsule Corp. Yeah. We actually get quite a few what-if requests that wish to discuss the possibility of events should Goku have landed somewhere else, and this destination seemed to be the most compelling at the time of us beginning this adventure, so we decided to roll with it. Like we said, Goku isn't called Goku here, as the nomenclature isn't really relevant to the Capsule Corp family. Instead, he is named after Boxer Shores, Boxer to be in keeping with things with the whole naming scheme, and he is also a far more dab hand when it comes to the world of engineering. Now okay, obviously, he's not going to be as technically savvy as the savants that are his older sisters, but he can certainly lift things, as well as know the ins and outs of mechanics. Let's just say that you would trust him with a wrench and fixing your car or bike or flying vehicle, you know, the norm in the Dragon world. In the last part, the Red Ribbon Army arc was squared away at last, with the Dragon team taking some valuable rest and relaxation time. Mark and Miguel, that's Fidel's mother by the way, got to know one another, despite her very busy singing career, but it was still a rather wholesome outing, which the fighter managed to understand the ins and outs of love throughout all of this, as well as actually getting some good hard work and pay away from the martial arts ring, actually doing good a job as a teamster. Then there was that moment where Boxer's biological mother, with the boy being unaware of this fact at all, getting to fight and meet her son, who was just a mere infant when they had last met. This was instead of Grandpa Gohan, obviously, since the old man had no connection to Boxer in this timeline, nothing to do with his infancy, and he was content obviously being in Paozu with his lot uninterrupted. However, when the 22nd tournament arrives, some nefarious ne'er-do-wells arrive from Boxer's travels, the likes of Tenshinhan and Chaozu. It had been a long time since Boxer had seen these folks, but despite this lovely little reunion, he was determined to get the better out of these evildoers after they had caused so much trouble for innocent people previously. Of course, he wouldn't have obviously gone all out, or as best as he could, taken their lives or anything like that, because first off, that would be stooping to their level seemingly, and he wouldn't want to do that. But also, there's the matter of the rules, and he reckoned that the tournament organisers wouldn't take too kindly to, you know, Boxer snuffing out the competition. In the end, he just decided to prove a point and embarrass the students of the Crane School in the ring the way he knew best, through combat. Now if you recall, the likes of Bulma was trained in martial arts too, along with the rest of the group. Was she going to be taking part this time around as well? Well, sadly not. In the end, after much considerate thought and weighing up options, she decided in the end to skip this tournament, as she had greatly focused recently on her education, as well as her future career of being the CEO of Capsule Corp once her father chose to step back operations and hand over the keys to her. And Dr. Briefs did actually compromise. He did suggest that she could compete in this tournament. He wasn't pressurizing her to do anything that she didn't want to do, but Bulma herself was certain. She had been, first and foremost, before this all began, a lover of engineering and science. That was the cold, hard truth. Martial arts was a good hobby and very good at keeping her fit, sprightly and trim, but it wasn't really something that she felt was wise to pursue for a job. She couldn't sustain it for all her life or have it as a means of income, so she chose simply to observe and stick to her talents. And then there are the others. Well, I mean, if it wasn't obvious to you already, Miguel and Mark are officially a couple. During those 3 years since Boxer departed to train, they had been travelling a lot thanks to the former's blooming fame as a singer and ever-growing fandom obviously around the world. But to be fair with Mark, he wasn't just working, he spent some of the last week's training instead of acting like a bodyguard and carrier of things because he was really good at it. And Miguel really understood that he wished to compete in this contest and didn't stand in his way, so she sought alternative assistance while her beau was busy benching weights. Though she did have to admit she really missed his ability to carry hundreds of pounds worth of equipment in one go, which alternatively took 10 people to accomplish, far less efficient. Yamcha, Krillin and Launch had been staying the course of what you could expect in this environment. In fact, what you would normally expect in Dragon Ball Z. They were perfecting themselves under Roshi's watchful eye back at Kame House. It was, there, a fairly relaxed environment, free from the pressures of the city life that they'd grown accustomed to, and it allowed all three of them to unwind and realign their goals in life. Launch in particular found this very beneficial. She had been running her life at 1,000,000 miles an hour, doing what she did, before she met these goons. And now that she had a new outlet for her frustration and inner anger and sass, she had mellowed out a fair bit, and even her blonde form was much more predictable and tolerable to be around. As you could imagine, they were all happy to meet each other once again, as well as them obviously representing the Turtle School. Their master, donning the identity of Jackie Chun one last time before hanging up his wig for good, was really proud to see such a huge number of his students making the cut into the contest. The prize and the prize money were in the bag for sure. He didn't normally lust for money in this guise, but this means of getting funds was something he chose to allow himself to idolize as it was in his chosen field. The whole Briefs family were there to cheer for Boxer, including Tights, the often absent eldest, and even Jaco stopped by to see how this little menace was doing. And yes, of course, he knew Boxer was no trouble at all, but he had to document that in his reports, that Boxer was still a person of interest and required regular observation for his unpredictable nature. Otherwise he wouldn't have been permitted to spend so much time on Earth. Red tape. When it comes to that, I'm the super duper elite. Right out of the gate, of course, Team Turtle is going pretty strong in this timeline, with the bolstered numbers. Boxer has a pretty exciting duel against King Chopper, which he wins handily, gaining his opponent's utmost respect, and they promise to fight once more in his village, to which Boxster enthusiastically accepts. You see, after travelling the world for so long, going somewhere he hadn't been yet was rather tantalising. And just like in the original, Tenshinhan's clash against Yamcha ends how you would expect. The former bandit was utterly devastated that, despite his newfound vigour and training, this bald clown had bested him and left him with broken bones as well as a broken ego. In this timeline, however, there is a meaningful change. There is no Manwolf, so Mark will be fighting against Jackie Chun, the master both regretting and not regretting this early encounter with one of his students. In his mind, right here and now, he had shrugged and said that this was bound to happen with so many of his pupils in the roster. He had already proven his point of discipline, so this tussle, it could be more for sport. This fight gives Mark some very vivid flashbacks from the previous contest, but he decides that this time, the outcome will be different. And this battle, this is a fight of attrition. Roshi is actually rather impressed how far Mark has gone with his training, even with his busy lifestyle of touring the world with his lady friend. But he isn't going to be giving him an easy victory, of course. As the battle wore on, Roshi started to spot some rather distinct differences with Mark's fighting technique. They had evolved over the years. And granted, there were things that Roshi recognized from the Turtle School era, but other things were definitely new, or at least not expected to have been implemented by Markable people. During Mark's journeys, the young man had been secretly developing his own fighting style, as you might know it later as the Satan Castle Dojo way. As this goes on, this starts to take the old man off guard with a lot of fake outs and misleading punches. It wasn't the most ideal style of combat in his eyes, evasive movements and tricks, but it was very clear that Mark's mind was starting to formulate his own path instead of aping another one. He was becoming his own person. And it becomes obvious for anyone watching that Mark's new way of fighting is to subvert the opponent's expectations. And from an audience's point of view, it looks amazing. And when it comes down to it, it makes the old master proud. Him realizing how far this previously shy and bumbling boy had come. And when it was clear even for the old man that the fight had gone on for way too long, Roshi decided to end it on his terms and stepped out of the ring without a second thought. Though Mark did find this outcome rather disappointing from what he would expect, after all the training and dreaming of this day he had been doing constantly, he is reassured that Jackie Chun had full faith in his victory and knew that he was going to lose anyway.
You got my word, kid. You were about to wallop me into the stands. I decided to skip the stay in the hospital, if you know what I mean.
Mark nodded and even chuckled. Oh, this old man and his ways. Meanwhile, Krillin, Boxer and Launch won their respective fights, and most notably, Krillin defeated Chaozu very much in the same vein as the original. The next fight is going to be another rematch, however, as it is the rematch between Launch and Boxer. Boxer was keen to turn the tides after last time, and Launch herself was keen to prove a point. Launch starts off in her blue form, but now she is much more focused than she was before. It turns out that she had spent an equal amount of time testing her might in both her forms instead of just the more feisty and confrontational blonde form exclusively. This was a very interesting and subversive sight to see an outwardly demure girl fighting like a seasoned pro. It certainly left the stands in awe and admiration, the crowd cheering in her favour. Boxer, on the other hand, is on a whole other level than before. His friend realises this, as he is able to watch her trying to sneeze and turn blonde instead of letting nature take her course. Yeah, she knew she could do well in her blue form, but this fight required the big stuff. Boxer lets her do it, so they can fight at their fiercest. No one is pulling punches, despite these two being good friends. But at the end of the day, Boxer's 3 years of isolation and intense progression have given him a greater inner peace and focus, and while Launch was trying to reach for her fury and really push her aggressive buttons, it is more like she's in the calm of the storm. And the fact that Boxer can keep his head is what helps him succeed, knocking Launch out of the ring. The young woman isn't salty though. She could tell that her friend's training was something else entirely. It was no mean feat, no cheap tricks were played here, and this was something that she could stomach. And she felt that this is something that nobody could get a handle of. Nobody could handle this. From what she could gather, Boxer's training sounded really harrowing, and he confirmed this. It had been for the first few months, but after that though, things sort of clicked. After hearing this affirmed and steady explanation, Launch is very proud of all of the progress her friends had made. The last 4 fighters in this contest remaining are Tenshinhan, Mark, Krillin, and Boxer. Tenshinhan mocks Mark, of course, for various reasons, starting with his loud voice, through his hairstyle, and ending at him stumbling a little bit on his feet, ungainly. Mark, however, reveals that he's dealt with bullies just like him throughout all of his life, and that people like Boxer and then later Krillin and especially Miguel helped him overcome his personal shame about his clumsiness. The bald one was unmoved by this inspirational speech, and simply continued to lambast the big guy, but Mark wasn't budging anymore. The fact that Tenshinhan had no legitimate answer to this, but instead chose to carry on with his rhetoric like before, showed that he had prevailed in this particular encounter. He'd gotten under Tenshinhan's skin. He then goes on to taunt Tenshinhan himself, giving him a taste of his own medicine. He would tear into him for serving a master that wants to turn him into a killing machine and nothing else, have no free will, that he himself must have been bullied as a youth. That's why he's taking it out on others. Tenshinhan, sure enough, and against his better judgment, is getting really angry about that, and behaves in a very merciless way against Mark, something of which even takes the likes of Master Shen by surprise. He isn't supposed to be losing his cool like this at such name-calling, so basic. But the young fighter doesn't stop talking. He has realized that his baiting of Tenshinhan was working against this steadfast fighter. He would make a note of that for his future dojo. When it becomes unbearable for the Triclops, Tenshinhan decides to shut him up once and for all with a Kamehameha that he learnt by watching some of the fights. And this is something that Mark nor anyone else expected. How could this punk learn the signature move just by looking at it? Granted, Boxer could do that, but Boxer, he was something else. But Tenshinhan? No, he was no more than a puppet of Shen's. The Triclops sadly emerges victorious, but Mark doesn't seem too ashamed by his loss despite the surprising twist. He struck a nerve with Tenshinhan. That may lead to his downfall later on against his best friend, to which Roshi strongly agrees.
Even if you couldn't steal the deal, kid, you've rattled him. And Boxer, I'm sure he knows what to do.
Then we have the duel between Boxster and Krillin, and just as we imagine, the boys are pretty evenly matched. It's a little bit different though, since Boxster doesn't have his tail, but as in the original, it still ends with a multi-hit. Now we have Boxster and Tenshinhan. To a point, this fight goes on as you can imagine, including the whole paralysis of Chaozu's, but Tenshinhan berates his friend for doing this by saying that he should not be interfering right now. After the stunt that Mark had pulled, he wanted to teach the ultimate lesson to the Turtle School: take down their star hitter himself through sheer grit. And Master Shen's not happy about this. He yells at his student for disobeying the master plan. But at this point, Tenshinhan is tired of his master, starting to realize that what Mark said might be true. It wasn't all baiting for the sake of baiting, maybe only sometimes. Roshi uses this opportunity to blast Shen away, so he cannot disturb Tenshinhan and Boxster anymore. And as in the original, the arena gets destroyed, both of the fighters get sent flying, the truck comes for Boxster, but in this timeline, our hero predicted that thanks to his more analytical brain and due to his knowledge of vehicles and how fast they can travel, even in mid-air. He uses multiple smaller ki blasts to launch himself up, one jump after another, and throws Tenshinhan into the ground and out of the truck's range, winning the tournament. The Triclops realizes that Boxster went the extra mile to ensure a safe landing for him, and thanks his opponent for that. And thanks to that unnecessary kindness, he then makes peace with the Turtle School, realizing that he had been used by Master Shen, with Chaozu joining his side, naturally. Boxster, however, gives Tenshinhan some of the prize money so he can start a new life for himself. You know, as the Bruce family, they've already got a lot of cash, they don't really need the money. So they celebrate a dinner, and Tenshinhan is able to be persuaded by Launch and Roshi to start training with them at Kame House when all of this was done. Meanwhile, Krillin goes to grab Boxster's things that he forgot, but he ends up being gone for quite an unusually long amount of time. When Boxster and Mark decide to investigate what took their friends so long, they discover a gruesome view. And that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now. So what do you folks think? How will the King Piccolo arc go in this newly minted arc? Will Boxster still lose his cool the way he did in the original? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!